Alright, so just like with the last puzzle cube part, I'm going to create a new part file. This part file will be used to generate another puzzle cube part, but done without the grid system. So I've created a sketch that's on the same plane, and I'm going to start with, let's go with a line. Now, there are easy ways and simple ways to use Inventor. In this particular case, I think this is just as effective as the other ways, but less efficient. So I've entered for a line to be 0.75 inches in height, and then I'm going to click and move this over to the right by 0.75 inches in height, and I'll hit enter, move it up another 0.75. Now, what's interesting about this is that I could make all of these equal to D0, my very first dimension that I applied. Notice how when I drag this back down, I want it to be 0.75. Now, I could either type in 0.75, or I could use the dashed line moving from left to right as an indicator that I have made this point on the same plane as the other horizontal line on the left-hand side of the feature that I'm currently making. But just to stay consistent, I'll type in 0.75 and I'll hit enter. Bring this over, another 0.75. Now I can move my mouse until it gets to 0.75, but if I don't hit 0.75 enter, it won't give me the actual dimension for it. So I can go about making it this way, repeating the same process over and over again, and then all the way back over to here, I'll make this one 2.25. And just because, I'll hit escape, and I'll create a line that is from here straight down until it is touching perpendicular to the bottom edge. And I'll create a line that is straight down from this corner till it is perpendicular, and then another one from here that's horizontal over to this corner. Now, I want to be able to extrude this so that it makes the object I'm looking for. So I'll finish sketch, zoom out a little, and when I hit extrude, it comes up with this dialog box that I can then pick profiles. And notice that it's giving me 4 different profiles. For some of you, you might find that this middle profile doesn't get created, and you want to just make sure that your line comes all the way down and bisects this 1.5 distance in half. So if that intersection is complete, then you don't have to worry about it, and it does make this profile. If it's not complete, there are some workarounds for that, and we can discuss that in class as necessary. Though, keep in mind, I find the grid method in the video previously to be the best option. Now again, I can put in 0.75 here, and then tell it to extrude this, and let's go backward away from me. And I can say OK. Now, I could pull up the original sketch that I had and share this sketch, or just to show you a different way of doing it, I can create a new 2D sketch and place it on this plane. Now keep in mind, I already have the square that I need that I want to pull forward. It is right here. So it's more efficient to share this sketch than it would be to create a new sketch, because all I would have to do is click on that and bring it forward, and there I have a very usable puzzle cube part. But I want to show you a different way. I could create this sketch on this plane and then tell it that I want to make, let's go with a rectangle this time, from this corner down to here so that I get 0.75 inches in width. The height one doesn't matter because I'm already going to apply the height of 0.75 by making it touch the bottom edge of this part. Now once that's placed, you'll see that my dimension for the overall width has now been placed in parentheses. This is a reference dimension now. It wasn't actually needed because I have 0.75, 0.75, and 0.75 right here. And because all of those were provided, Inventor understands that that totals up to 2.25. The 2.25 here is not really necessary, but it's good to have if you're sketching it in one particular way versus another. And keep in mind, there's just tons of different ways to go about creating this same part. So there I could say OK, and it creates it. Let's say, and I'll turn this sketch that I just created back off. What I'll do in this case is just tell this entire extrusion to be suppressed, which means it's there, but we're not considering it. And then for this original sketch, I'm going to use it. I'm going to leave it as shared, but the extrusion is what I'm going to mess with. And I'm going to go back to Profile, and you'll notice that it doesn't let me select any because they've all been consumed. However, I can hold Shift on my keyboard and deselect that profile. And I can say OK, and you'll see that this object now looks as if it has a hole in the middle of it. Well, let's say that I wanted to have a plus sign on the bottom with one cube sticking up. Again, that would be a plus sign, so 0.75 sticking out forward, a cube in the middle on the bottom, and then a 0.75 inch cube sticking out of the bottom going backward, as well as one on the left and one on the right. I can choose Extrusion, this profile, and then instead of it coming toward me, or even away from me, or even symmetrically in both directions, I could tell it to be asymmetric, so that one side is 0.75 asterisk, or times, this is multiplication, 2, and it would send it out twice 0.75. So 1.5 in this case. And then I could say 0.75 for the first one, and all of that is OK. So I click on the OK button, and I have my extrusion. I'd right-click and turn off the visibility, and there is a more complicated part. So multiple ways to go about making these objects. Let's back up to this point here, where I have my very first line. This first line is not necessary. I could start by thinking of this line as having more than just one dimension, therefore making it a shape. Let's go back one more step, and we'll see that I can take a rectangle and add 0.75 by D0, or clicking on the actual dimension. Oops. Turn on my dimension and place it as D0. There we go. From here, I could take and create another rectangle, only this one, starting at the bottom left corner of this new rectangle, I'll make as being D0 in its width and 1.5 in its height. And then I'll make another one here that is D0 in its width and D0 in its height. This 1.5 dimension for its total height, I could actually make that one as 2 times D0, and it'll keep it as 1.5 and then make it have a height of 1.5. Now, that means that this is going to be one big profile, and these will be 2 smaller profiles. If I finish the sketch, I can extrude those, all 3 of them, going backward, and tell that dimension to be D0. And I'll get stuck with this. That would mean that I would either have to create a new sketch, place it on here, and, let's drop in a rectangle this time. Connect this together with a rectangle. Finish my sketch, and extrude it, keeping in mind that that rectangle touched at this corner and this corner down here. Look at what this does. It creates an inconsistency. What we think is that this sketch has this rectangle at 0.75 by 0.75, and it likely is very close to being 0.75. Notice all the zeros that it carries it out. It would be ideal if I called this D0, and if I called this one, which it's going to give me an error here and tell me that it's over constraining it. But I would want to call that one D0 as well. And the reason that it's over-constraining it is that I have applied a geometric constraint to this rectangle by saying that it is the same height as these 2 points. Therefore, I don't need to apply another dimension to it. So it's a little complicated to understand if you're new to Inventor, but the idea is we don't want to apply more dimensions than necessary. This D0 is necessary because I don't know that I wanted it to be all the way over to this point. Remember, when I placed this rectangle, I simply stopped at this point down here, identifying that it is on the bottom, not necessarily locking it into anything in width. So having that dimension there is very much so necessary in this case. So I would say finish sketch and extrude that profile toward me. Now, I could go both directions, but you'll notice that if I do, I wind up with, oops, here we go, D0 times 2, going through material that already exists. Now, that can be an issue for Inventor in some cases, and sometimes it doesn't even bother with it. In this case, it's not going to care. It only cares if I tell it to cut material and there's nothing there to cut. So, in this case, it just built material through there. It didn't really care. Alright, so here I'm back to having that shape that I made earlier, as well as if I wanted to, I could make that second extrusion not be in both directions and only in one, and I have an altogether different form. With a totally different puzzle cube part, creating a totally different color, saving the file however it is I feel to save it, and saving copies if that makes it easier. There's a multitude of ways that you can go about making these puzzle cube parts. How you do it is what's most efficient to you. The grid system works for me, and it works for many other people. Dimensioning things off is also a really good way to do this. You can use lines, you can use the squares. I've even seen students make the object so that it is a complete solid block, and they use sketches and they cut material away. That's a much more complicated way of going about doing this, but it is possible if we back you up to the very beginning and show you how to do some extrusion cuts. You can see how to do it. Now let's say that I make a rectangle that is 1.5 inches in 1.5 inches in height and 2.25 inches in width. Now I have this. I could say that since this is 1.5 and this is 2.25, and 2.25 was my original dimension D0, then this one I could make, to keep it all parametric, D0 times 2 over 3. Because 1.5 is 2/3 of 2.25. And then I could extrude this by .25. From here, I could take this object and create, a sketch on multiple different faces. I could put one here, and I could say put a rectangle from this corner so that it is 0.75, or in this case, you could even say D0 divided by 3, and this one so that it is D0 divided by 3, and then I could repeat that over here, D0 divided by 3 and D0 divided by 3, and I could extrude cut those. When I extrude cut, I use this button, and I would tell it to go not just D0, but rather through all of it. And I could do it for both profiles that are out here. But you'll notice this one didn't quite touch the base or the side. And that's part of our issue. It's a lot more complicated and difficult to do. Enjoy your inventor work.